what is hard for you about dating? And what are the things that you know you need in a partner?
I think dating can be hard for me because, whoo, that's a big one.
I was like, I didn't see this coming, but when you were talking about that and that came out, I was like, I got to dig into that.
Um, I think again, kind of what I touched on earlier. I think right now I'm at this point where like I am starting to learn my worth and the things that I'm able to bring to the table, and I won't tolerate certain things like,
Mm.
and it'll lead right into the three things that I need. So I think that's a big piece of it. And I think I've been trying really hard to hold myself accountable that I'm not overshooting and not tolerating anything. Because I think sometimes we can do that as humans. And
That's
that's that accountability piece that I hold other people and myself to is like, hey, Medina, like, are you being like a little too harsh on the communication or like the lack of planning or whatever?
mm.
But then also trusting my intuition that like, hey, like, no, that's like a bare minimum basic need. Um, so I think that's partially what's been challenging about it. And my needs, I definitely need a good communicator. And when I say communication, to be clear, I want clear communication of like, oh, like you want to go on a date, but like don't say like we should do something sometime, right? Or even like let's do something this week. Even with my girlfriends, it's like, hey, Friday 6 p.m. Are you free? Great, let's grab dinner, right? We'll pick a spot. To me, it shows a level of intentionality. I'm also an overthinker, and this goes back to part of what it will frustrate you about me is part of why you like me. Part of why I'm a very
Mhm.
good therapist is I know how to read between the lines. People who are anxious or overthinkers also tend to be extremely caring people. I'm going to
Yeah.
remember the candy bar you told me you liked from 3 years ago, and I'm going to leave it outside your door, right? So, like,
Oh, I am
I
too.
yeah. So I just feel like I've also been learning to love that about myself because it's part of who I am. And are there times when I can tone it down and again hold myself accountable? Maybe I'm thinking too much about that. But I also need like I saw this quote and I like love it so much. It says, moral of the story is an overthinker needs to date a good communicator. Um,
That's so true.
it is. And it's like it's not like a I think sometimes men or other people might think communication means you have to over communicate. No, it just has to be direct. Like
Yeah.
I was even just talking to someone about this. It's like just communicate to me that you can't communicate this week, really. And that in itself is communication and takes
Yeah.
2 seconds, right? Communicate to me that it's hard for you to communicate, right? The
Give
transparency.
you something to work with.
Yeah. So communication is number one. Physical touch is my love language. I love touch. I feel so loved, when I have that physical touch. Um, and emotional like vulnerability. Like and this is also like and maybe again, maybe I'm in La La Land and I'm naive or something and
These
they're
are pretty standard things, I think, that you're saying.
oh,
Like,
they're really hard to find. They're really hard to find. But like there's nothing more attractive to me than a man who can admit that he's like struggling. And I know,
mm,
and again, there is a balance. Am I saying I want my man telling me he's struggling every day? No, right? But like if I've been dating you for 2 years and I've never seen you get emotional, that's a red flag to me. Like
yeah.
I don't want that. If you come home and you told me this whole day and it was so stressful and I say, "Oh my god, babe, I'm sorry. Like that sounds so stressful." And you're like, "I'm not stressed." Well, this signals to me so
So
many
I
things.
believe, yeah, I,
You're not in tune with your emotions, right? So if you don't know how to emote stress, you're not going to know how to emote proper love to me because you can't selectively numb emotions, right?
mm,
And I'm not trying to sound pervy here, but I'm just going to say this. Any man I've dated that's emotionally closed off is also not good in bed. And I'm and I'm
no,
and
I believe that.
I'm not trying to sound like weird when I say this, but it clicked for me probably like a year and a half ago. I'm like, it's because they don't know how to emote intimacy and passion and connection because they've numbed sadness and grief. So they've numbed everything, right? So that's the first red flag it gives me. And the second is if I'm stressed and I had a stressful day and I come home and I tell you these things, well, I'm not going to want to tell you these things now because you don't think it's stressful. You don't think it's warranted to have that emotion. At least that's the signal I get, right? I want to be
Well,
able,
that's a good point. That's a
like,
really good point.
that's how you connect. That's why people develop crushes on their therapist all the time because you are telling them things that are bringing you connected. The
And you're getting validated, and you're so that makes sense, because then if you're coming home and you had a stressful day at work and your partner doesn't experience stress at work, which is bullshit, but then you're like, well, stress at work isn't something that he understands or really matters to him or is a real thing. That's actually a really good point. I've never thought of it like that. But if
yeah.
you can't, yeah, the men in bed thing, I buy that. I believe that, because then you
Like,
can't even talk about it.
yeah, like I can't even tell you, like having like like the vulnerable conversation of like, what do you like, what don't you like the men that I've dated that have emotionally closed off, we never had those conversations, right? And like,
Wow.
I don't know, I had a deep conversation with my friend the other day though, because again, I'll hold myself accountable too. She's like, do you think you like unconsciously date emotionally closed off men because you're a little emotionally closed off? And I was like, and you're just picking someone who's even more emotionally closed off, so it's kind of like you don't even notice.
Would you
uh,
describe yourself as emotionally closed off, though?
Honestly, yeah. I think
Okay.
because, and this is something I'm going to be working on the next couple of weeks because I'm taking my first ever, aside from filming, this is my first 3 weeks off ever as a therapist. I've never taken more than a week off from
Oh,
therapy.
wow.
Um, and in all transparency, like I've actually been struggling like quite a bit just because I feel like my job is like very unique in the sense of like I really do have to turn off my emotions. Like if I have to cry or if I'm upset, I have to like hop in
Mm,
and not only be like okay looking, but I have to be like that solid base for that person. And like it can wear on you like
I
really,
bet.
really bad. So at the end of the day, it's like hard to want to like touch base with your own emotions. And I grew up with my dad being very like nothing's ever good enough. Like my one of my core
Mm,
memories is like coming home as a little kid with a 98 and being so excited and my dad being like where's the other 2 points, which really I think and I try not to minimize it because my friend I was like it sounds so silly, she's like it's not silly, like it's a
yeah.
very monumental like setting the precedence of what
Perfectionism. You're
yeah,
expected to be perfect,
yeah. So I
not
think
just good enough.
yeah, totally. Like, and even I have like I think a tendency to like seek out men who like are unimpressed. Like, I think I'm someone who I'm gonna like try to give myself some accolades. Like, I would say I'm a pretty impressive woman, and like I think I unconsciously seek out men who are like unimpressed by like what I can bring to the table because it matches what I believe about the world. Kind of like
Your
what I was telling.
self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah,
Yes.
like
Yeah.
yeah, like oh, like if I did an event, they probably wouldn't wind up coming. Like, like not much.
Which is, by the way, how you were talking about your event before we started recording today.
What was I
Like
doing?
you were saying like, oh, I don't know if I can get 50 men or whatever
Oh,
it was. Like you
yeah, Tommy.
your negative self speak. It's
I actually came here for therapy, you guys.
But I think so. You know what I think is hard too with dating, and again, I'm like several years removed from it at this point. But what I think is so hard about dating now is everyone has these like unrealistic expectations of what a relationship is supposed to be like. And I think
Mhm.
social media contributes to it. I actually think reality TV contributes to it. And
Mhm.
I think that, one of the things Dr. Isabel Morley says, who's on my foundation, she's a psychologist, is that what reality TV does is it actually shows like bad behaviors and normalizes like toxic behaviors, whether they're real or not, whatever, you can get into that. But I think it's like that in social media and the idea that everything has to be this fairy tale. And I actually used to think this when I was younger about like movies, like
Mhm.
rom-coms, right? Because I watched a lot of rom-coms in high school with my high school girlfriend. It
Oh,
was you see a horror movie for me and I'll see a rom-com for you kind of exchange. And so I saw, and I just felt it kind of like created unrealistic expectations of like grand romances and relationships, and that the problems you're actually having aren't really that like real. They're like one big problem you have to overcome in a rom-com to work out. And I think that's kind of escalated with social media where people just want this social media friendly relationship or this grand love story on The Bachelor or Love is Blind or whatever, and it just kind of gives people sort of this unrealistic expectation of what a relationship is, because they're
mhm.
hard work. They're really hard work. On their best days, they still take work.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like I know that some people try to use this word probably in a different way that I'm interpreting it, but I hate the idea of organic. I think like chemistry, like if you're physically attracted to someone is organic. But the actual act of building a relationship, because when I hear that, I hear, oh, like, I don't want to plan when our date is, or like, no, we're two grown ass adults. We're gonna have to plan, and there's nothing organic about us making like setting aside intentional time to spend quality time with each other. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I agree, and yeah, like, I don't know, and even like, I'll transparently say this, like, even after I got off the show, like, how many people are like offering me free like Botox and filler and all this stuff, and it's like, I don't judge anyone who does it. I don't personally do it, but it's like, then I'm like, sometimes I do get self-conscious. I'm like, I'm seeing these women on social media, and it's like, these are the girls that are kind of like booed up. It's like these like beautiful like everything.
Oh, I know. It's
So there's a lot of like comparison that can go on, and what we think our relationship looks like in Santorini on Friends. Like, I'm
yeah.
like, when are these people working? I'm like,
Serious. Well, I think there's also, I wonder that too all the time. I'm like, where's this person funding whatever it is? These trips,
I know.
these glamorous gowns, and these intense, like, oh, check out this thing I bought. It's only like $50,000. It's like, who's doing that? It's like, who's getting this stuff? It's totally crazy. I really think excuse me, social media has set such unrealistic expectations on so many things. And then I'm like, how are you dating? Like, where do you find men that you want to date?
Well, I'll let you know when and if I find that.
Yes, please do let me know.
I was on Hinge for a little, but I paused that because I was just getting so tired from that.
It's exhausting. I was exhausting years ago. Like, it's fake. It's my therapist keeps telling me to get on dating apps, and I'm like, no, not now. There's an elephant in the room, and if I call it out and say, yes, that was me on, this show, or I don't, like, both are terrible experiences, right? Because, like, if I call it out, it sounds like I'm bragging, which is definitely not what I'm doing. And if I don't, then it seems like I'm hiding it, right?
No.
So you don't think so?
I think you're scared to go back on them, but like, either way, you don't know what's going to happen.
Well, yes, that is true. And then I tell myself this: do I see myself at the end of my day sitting on Hinge, scrolling, liking, responding to very surface level conversations? That sounds like a horrible way to spend my evenings.
Yeah, it's not. I have a lot of thoughts. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, mine's paused for a reason. So.
Yeah, I hear you. Well.